All right, guys, I will be quick, and then I'll certainly open it up to you guys. Obviously, today, first day of spring practice. I think as a coach, you're always excited about that. Obviously, the last 4 weeks, we've been able to be with our football team, which has been really exciting for myself and our staff. I think the whirlwind of the last 2.5 months, it was really good to get back around our football team and really start to install what we look for in our football program. And obviously, a foundation of great attitude and effort is our starting point. And, I thought we really made good strides in those areas the last 2 weeks, and obviously, we'll take a look at what today's practice looked like day one, and we've got a lot of work to do. Our kids know that, I know that, but we'll take it one day at a time. So with that said, I'll certainly open up to you guys, questions you may have.
Matt, the one starter you have put back on the offensive line, Campbell, isn't even going through spring practice. How do you guys approach what you're doing on the offensive line to find some of those guys so you can have to start?
Yeah, I think obviously repetition and opportunity is really at a premium right now at that position. And it's obviously some guys that have played some snaps. Nick Fett played a little bit last year. Obviously, J.P. Filber played some. So I think really it's a matter of starting at square one. It's ironic because we kind of did the same thing a year ago at Toledo, and, we've been down that road, and we'll just take it one day at a time. I think, the key for us is to go as that offensive line goes in terms of how we install plays, and that's okay. I'd rather come out with a great foundation to who we are offensively coming out of spring practice rather than trying to do too much all at once.
How important is versatility going to be when you're trying to find those right pieces?
Well, and I think that's a great question. I think if you look at our history of our O-line, that's always been the case. And the reality of it, anybody should be able to play anywhere, any of the 5 spots. And so I think that's big. I think we've already addressed that and talked about it through the winter with the young men, that there's really not even a depth chart right now. And you saw I didn't even put one. I told our guys it's a rep chart, quite honestly. And we'll sort it all out. We'll see what guys' skill sets match, what our expectation is for each position. And that's not just on the O-line, it's really across the board right now. And then we'll make our decisions based off of that.
Is there anyone so far on the O-line through conditioning workouts and maybe even today that's stood out?
Well, there are some guys that have stood out. For me to give names right now, I think it's unfair until we see practice. I think some guys really did some great things in winter conditioning, which we were, I think offensive line, that's kind of their time. You talk about attitude and effort and toughness, and that winter conditioning is really hard, and you want to see who can kind of work through the tough times of it. And I think some guys did some great things, but until we put on pads, until we get through maybe the first couple of days of practice, I'll have some probably better names for you once we get through that. But yes, some guys have certainly stood out.
How do you feel right now as far as some of the guys that maybe are coming off injuries last year, like Patrick Scoggins or Gabe Luna, Terry, I think some of those guys now getting acclimated back this spring?
Well, I think a lot of guys, that's the one thing that I saw. There were definitely some injuries, and guys were either limited reps or whatever that may be a year ago. And I think that's the one nice thing with change a little bit too, is everybody starts with a clean slate. And now all of a sudden you're allowed to kind of come into this with a clean slate with no preconceived notions. And I think we said that from day one, and obviously allowed these guys to start from scratch and really allowed them to see what they look like over a period of time. So again, those are some good names. Some of those guys have done some good things, but until we see a body of work that's more than just 4 weeks with them, it's unfair to say anything more than that, other than it's nice for those guys to get a clean slate and to show what they can do within our system.
You'll get a couple more running backs in the summer, but what did you see from those guys today in the limited time you saw? Obviously Mike, but then Sheldon Coney looked like was working out with those guys. What did you see from them?
Well, I think obviously Mike, is a guy that my challenge to him is to continue to get better. Obviously it was nice to have a great year last year, but I've said this and I'll continue to say this about Michael, is you've gone from the guy that's kind of the hunter to now being the guy that's going to be the hunted, and that's a big change. And the expectations rise, and that's what's hard about having success early in a career is, do you have the mental capability to press and get better, week in, week out, year in, year out, and Mike's certainly under that microscope right now. So, I think he's had a good winter. He's going to have to continue to have a great spring to continue to match my expectations, and I think probably your expectations for Mike. And then equally, I think it's nice to have Sheldon, Sheldon, obviously a tough injury. We're working him back into the groove. I really like what he brings to the table. I've been able to watch his high school tape to see what his capabilities are. I think he's a very capable football player. But again, how does he come back from the injury? What's it look like when there's contact? what's it look like over a long period of time? I think that's a great unknown right now. Mitch Harger is another young man. I'll be honest with you, I think he's got a tremendous skill set, and really excited to see what he can do. You know, I think if you really watch the games last year and watch what he did when he was in, he's a guy that's a very capable football player. So I've got great expectations for Mitch. So, and we'll see obviously with some young guys coming in.
When it comes to Mike, when you need him to do more than next level, is it on the field stuff? Because at that point, there's only so many more rushing yards.
Yeah.
Is it more off the field stuff? What has to happen for him to be able to do that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it starts with off the field, obviously, with how you study the game of football, how you prepare, having a knowledge of obviously the challenges that come with having expectations around you. You know, last year you're kind of this young guy, you just go play the game. Well, now all of a sudden defenses are going to start to strategize how to take you out of the football game. You know, skills that defensive guys are going to tip that. Do you have the mental capability to understand that and adapt your game to those things? And then equally conditioning. You know, I mean, like you said, Michael's really the only guy with significant amount of reps that were played last year at that running back position. So, you know, to ask him to play a great amount of reps, it's going to take him being in the best shape of his life to come in and be productive for us to be successful.
Coach, I found it interesting in your prospectus that you raved about your interior defensive line. Can you kind of elaborate on that and what makes you so confident about that group going forward?
Yeah, you know, I think the raving part from my end is the body types and the body structure probably more than anything. You know, I think one of the things that I really appreciated and looked at is the size of those guys in there. And really, as you break down the videotape, and this wasn't consistent, but there's flashes from all those guys in that interior defensive line that says, hey, they can be really good players on this level, especially playing in the Big 12 schedule. And so my challenge is, can that now be a consistent play? And I think that's what we have to bring to the table with these guys. And again, that goes more so than just showing up one game or, you know, sporadically through a 12-game season. It's the ability to dominate and play with great consistency, get in great shape, great mental effort, and have the ability to play. But I think we really like the skill set of the young men that are playing for us in there.
Coach, you've got a pretty good mix of guys that have been here and then new guys at the quarterback position. What have you seen from them? And then what was kind of the process of getting Kyle Kent on campus as well?
Yeah, obviously the guys that are here, you know, I think those guys, it's been really fun to watch those guys. You know, again, you talk about a guy like Joel Lannick, and I'll start with Joel. And Joel is, I think if you really, again, go back, watch the film, really evaluate it, Joel brought a lot to the table the last 5 games last year. You know, he added some energy to the offense. He really played well and capable throughout the last 5 games of the season. And I think now it's a matter of him being comfortable and yet continuing the strain to grow as quarterbacks have to. And so I think he's really taken that personal and really done a great job in terms of leading and growing within our offense now. And I had to learn that new terminology. You know, Dom is a guy that I think we're all excited about. I'm going to be honest with you, he's been a surprise maybe over the last 4 to 5 weeks. He had a great winter. Really proud of him and really proud of his attention to detail. And then some of the new guys, you know, Zeb, we just announced our Champions Club today, you know, and it's really a 6 to 8 week first quarter. You know, we break the season into 4 quarters, and that first 8 weeks back, winter workouts included. And here's a young freshman that come in here his first 8 weeks of college football, and he's in that Champions Club, which meant he had a great winter. Many got stronger, many competed in our winter drills and came out with a winning record. And, you know, I think Zeb just gets it. He loves football, and so I think he's brought a lot to the table. And then, you know, you talk about Kyle Kemp. I think Kyle's relationship and my relationship is knowing Kyle. Obviously, Kyle comes into our program as a preferred walk-on. You know, went to Oregon State on scholarship. Played at a really good high school football program over in Northeast Ohio, Massillon, Ohio, which is kind of in my hometown. So went through the recruiting process a little bit when I was at Toledo with Kyle. And, you know, I just think familiarity is what brought him here and an opportunity. And so, again, we'll see how that continues to go over the course of time. But Kyle's a great young man. He really loves the game of football. And, again, he's competitive. And I think the common theme that I hope you hear from the quarterback position, I would hope, under our regime is you love the game of football. You're gym rats, and I think all those guys really have that mentality so far, which I appreciate.
I noticed that Jay Jones was over playing a little bit of cornerback today. What are you seeing in him there? And is that going to be a place that he plays more of this season?
Well, I think that's our starting point right now because, length. I'm a big believer in length in terms of cornerback play. And, Jay's a guy that, again, had a phenomenal winter for us. And we kind of said, as we really evaluated the videotape, is he better off closer to the football? Or is he better off maybe farther away from the football where he can use his length and his skill? And, obviously Jay may not be the fastest corner that we have, but his length and his power and his strength, and he is loose. So it's kind of a starting spot, probably a little bit exploratory from our side of things. But, you talk about guy being a situational player and maybe even growing into a guy that's really comfortable there. I think we'll see, but that's where our starting point is with Jay.
As for this last hour, it seemed like Kapamoya is kind of taking charge of it as the leader of the cornerbacks. And what do you have seen out of him, and what is your expectation this spring going into the fall season?
Yeah, that again, great question. Kamari, obviously, and this goes back to me playing against Kamari, for the last 2 years and trying to run the ball or throw the ball opposite of where he was the entire time. There was a great deal of respect coming from him from the beginning. And Kamari, I think, has a tremendous high ceiling of skill set and ability. What I'd like to see from Kamari is Kamari to be that player every game and every play. And I think if he can match that expectation, I think great things are going to come because he loves football. He's got a great skill set. He's just got to continue to get better, and we've got to keep him healthy. But, he's been tremendous so far. He's really been tremendous from the day I stepped on campus, and I really appreciate that about him. But going into it, I've got a tremendous amount of respect for who he is and what he brings to our defense.
How's he doing health-wise?
Yeah, I think pretty good. That was a tough go today. That was a long day, and I don't think he missed any reps today, which is great. He really did a great job through winter. I think we had to be smart with him, but I think he's a guy that it's really important. He's done a really good job the last 8 weeks, and we'll have to continue to do a great job getting him in great shape, making sure we take care of all the details that we need to with him to keep him on the football field.
What's the process for getting Zeb and Kyle some new quarterbacks? What's the process of getting them, molded here?
Yeah, well, I think reps. Honestly, it's reps and just continuing to be available when they're not taking reps. And if you saw today, we really cut out meeting times. I'm not interested in meetings on days of practice. I'd rather be out on the practice field and either getting great mental reps, or I think we all learn by doing. And what I found out more today's generation, the more you're on the field and actually going through the process, the more you're going to have success. And especially this first year where we're coming in and everybody's learning new, I think it's all about getting quality reps. And, there's a fine line on that, obviously, but I think we got to do a great job of getting all those quarterbacks, plus really everybody in our program, quality reps. Learn by doing, come back tomorrow, study the videotape, get some good video reps now, correct it, and then come back and get more reps the next day.
You guys have some versatile spots on your defense. What do you specifically see, especially with the guys that could play the Leo position for you, or guys that might be hybrid safeties even?
Yeah, well, everybody says, what are you going to play? Well, the reality is we have no idea, and I think until, and you've heard me probably say this even in my initial press conference, players, formations, plays. I think our early setting is what can our players do? Then what formation should we be in and what plays should we actually call? And so I think, you talk about the Leo position and our nickel position. Those are skill sets that Leo guys that have the ability to be maybe a hybrid high-end pass rusher, but also have the ability at times to drop into coverage and move into an interior linebacker at times as well for us. The nickel spot is a guy that, maybe can play man coverage at times for us in terms of being able to play, but also have enough strength and power that he can set the edge of the defense against the bubble teams and the teams that want to win on the perimeter. So unique skill sets. I think we're happy with what we've seen, but we really have no idea in terms of, until we get out and practice, what we really have that fit some of those positions that we've played in the past.
You had the offensive guys going through a series of balls into your control.
Yeah.
Some coach might just do one of those. Those significant practice time going through. Why did you want to do that on the first day?
Well, our initial meeting with the entire football team is the starting point for this football program has got to be the ball. And until we improve that, we will make no progress in our football program. And obviously you look at our numbers a year ago, not where it needs to be. And you take some of those situations away on probably both sides. Defensively, get the football back. Offensively, take care of the football. Those are things that control no talent. It takes no talent. And so you're going to see us do that every day. It's called win the 12. And, you know, for us to be competitive, to be a championship football program, we must do that, and we'll do it every day in practice.
Coach, having watched Alan Lazard from the opposite sideline prepared for him, has what you've seen out here matched up with what you thought you were going to get?
Yeah, great question. You know, again, Alan's another one of those guys that a lot like Kamari, you come into it and you just have the utmost respect. But to me, you find out why was there that respect of what you saw on videotape from a year ago. And here's a young man, I think his record in our winter workout program was 115-20. You know, it was staggering. He had a phenomenal winter in terms of what we expect from him in terms of leadership. And it doesn't surprise me when I go out and I see him. I think, you know, even some plays he made today in practice were pretty spectacular. He's that guy, but he's that guy every day. And until we get more of guys like that every day, not just the flash in the pan guy, you know, that's our challenge. But it's great to have your best players be some of your most consistent people on and off the football field. And obviously, Alan brings that to the table for us.
With Campbell's and his injuries, is there any concern about that lingering on the spring?
No, you know, I think, you know, I think he's done a really good job in terms of catching up. You know, he's another, I'd say, a football junkie. You know, he's in the film room when we're in the film room. He's around all the time, and I appreciate that about him. You know, I think him and Coach Manning have really developed a great relationship, and I've seen him in some areas that I've challenged him with this injury. You know, get your upper body strength, get it to where it needs to be for us to be capable and you to be capable to be the best you can be. And I think right now, if you look at him, he's a different guy than he was 8 weeks ago. He looks the part now, and he's getting bigger and stronger. And you can only control what you can control, and he's got to be able to do that right now and get really good mental reps. So to me, I don't know if it's as big. You know, he's played a lot of snaps, which is great for him, but now it's a matter of the nuance that it takes to be an elite offensive lineman and his ability to do that. And obviously, we'll have to play some catch up in some other areas in the summer.
But just look like he'll be back in the fall.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I may try to sneak him in some drills a little bit later at the end of the spring.
Did he already have surgery?
He did.
What do you have operated on?
Yeah, it was his hip, you know, and nothing that was a major surgery by any stretch of the imagination. They really went in and just cleaned some things out. I think a lot of what we're doing right now is precautionary. And, you know, again, when you have a young man like him that's played so many reps, I don't think it's worth the risk of trying to get him back too fast. So, you know, it's not something that was a major surgery and not something that I think any of us are worried about. And grinding through it right now, and I think he's done a really good job of that.
One more question for Coach?
Yeah, Quan West, Dunning, are they?
Both are medical hardship. So both are a situation where they're still in school, they're still with the football team, but they're physically unable to play anymore. So both of those young men are in that situation.
Anybody else in that spot or not going through spring practice?
You know, other than Levi and Jake, you know, no, but we picked up some great assistant coaches, so I'm really fired up about those guys. They've done a great job, and as a matter of fact, really, we're all here this morning ready to rock and roll with our coaching staff, so it's great to have their leadership still in the program.
All right, Coach, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.